Hey guys, most people spend their entire lives trying to be the loudest voice in the room, never realizing that the loudest voice is almost always the weakest. Think about the culture we live in today. From the frantic pace of the morning commute on a crowded interstate to the high-stakes environment of a modern corporate boardroom, we are surrounded by relentless noise. We are constantly told that if you want to get ahead, if you want to climb the ladder, command respect, and lead others, you have to dominate. You have to be the fastest thinker, the most aggressive negotiator, the person with all the answers ready to fire off at a moment's notice. You have to hustle, assert yourself, and make sure everyone knows exactly what you bring to the table. But I want you to pause and picture a room deep in the middle of a crisis. Deadlines are looming. Millions of dollars might be on the line. Expectations are clashing, and everyone is talking over one another. Tension is rising, and panic is spreading like a storm across a still lake. Then, someone walks in. They do not shout over the chaos. They do not slam a hand on the conference table or demand immediate silence. They simply take a seat, observe, and project an absolute, unshakable calm. Almost instantly, the temperature of the room drops. The frantic crosstalk begins to fade. People naturally turn their attention toward this person, leaning in to hear what they have to say. Why does this happen? Because influence is not claimed, it is embodied. True presence, the kind that draws people naturally and commands quiet respect, never comes from boasting, arguing, or frantically proving yourself. It begins with mastering your mind, your reactions, and your actions. The Stoics understood this profoundly. They taught that true strength is completely invisible, rooted not in how loudly you can dictate the actions of others, but in how flawlessly you manage the turbulence inside yourself. If your mind trembles even slightly under pressure, it transmits uncertainty to everyone around you. But if it remains stable and deliberate, it sets the tone for the entire environment. The Stoics described this as building the citadel of the mind, a space utterly impervious to external disturbance. Maybe you have felt the deep frustration of trying to play the loud game. You have raised your voice in a meeting, desperately trying to get your brilliant idea across, only to be spoken over by someone with half your competence but twice your volume. You have engaged in arguments where you tried to force someone to understand your perspective, only to walk away exhausted, realizing you gained absolutely no ground. You might feel like you simply do not fit into this aggressive, extroverted mold. If you have ever felt different from the loud crowd, if you have ever felt that your quiet nature is a liability in a society that rewards the boisterous, this message is exactly for you. You do not need to change your core personality. You do not need to become someone you are not. Instead, you need to understand that the people who remain calm, consistent, and deliberate wield an influence that never requires them to raise their voice. They understand that their thoughts, their habits, and their reactions are the invisible levers of influence. When you cultivate mastery of yourself, the external world begins to respond differently. Influence stops being a frantic chase and becomes something you quietly embody. People unconsciously reflect your energy, mirroring your composure and steadiness just as readily as they would mirror panic. You become the stabilizing anchor. This is the secret to true authority. It is not about asserting dominance. It is about cultivating a presence so deeply rooted that people cannot help but see you as a leader without you ever having to say a single word. To truly understand the weight of this quiet authority, we must look back at a man who held more absolute power than almost anyone else in human history. Imagine being the emperor of Rome, commanding fierce legions that stretched across thousands of miles of territory, holding the power of life and death over millions of individuals. You have total supremacy. If you demand immediate silence, you get it. If you want someone removed from your presence, it happens in the blink of an eye. Yet, Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher king, did not rule his empire through terror, unpredictable screaming fits, or loud, theatrical demonstrations of his dominance. Instead, he governed through a profound, almost unsettling level of self-mastery. In his private journals, which the world now knows as meditations, he wrote a simple but life-altering truth. He stated that you have power over your mind, not outside events, and that when you realize this, you will find true strength. Think about the modern equivalent of leadership we see today. We routinely observe corporate executives in the corner office throwing tantrums because a quarterly projection was off by a fraction of a percent. We see managers raising their voices and turning red over a minor scheduling error. We witness people losing their absolute minds in a massive traffic jam on the interstate, honking their horns and shouting out of their windows as if that noise will magically move the thousands of vehicles in front of them. Now, contrast that frantic modern behavior with an ancient emperor who was actively facing invading armies, a devastating plague that was wiping out his population, and a heartbreaking political betrayal by one of his most trusted generals. In the face of all that overwhelming chaos, Marcus Aurelius did not lash out in a blind rage. He retreated inward to find stillness. He understood profoundly that a leader who cannot control his own temper cannot possibly hope to manage the complexities of an empire. His calm demeanor was his ultimate weapon. It was an invisible force that commanded the unwavering loyalty of his battle-hardened legions and the deep reverence of the Roman citizens. They did not merely fear his title. They deeply respected his character because his internal stability provided a predictable harbor for the entire empire during times of severe crisis. This is the exact kind of unshakable authority that you can begin to build in your own everyday life. You certainly do not need a vast empire or a massive corporate throne to wield this kind of profound power. Whether you are leading a small creative team, managing the daily chaos of your household, or simply trying to navigate a highly stressful career without losing your sanity, the Stoic principles remain exactly the same. Over the rest of our time together, I am going to walk you carefully through 5 specific, silent shifts in your daily behavior that will completely rewire how other people perceive you and respond to you. These are not cheap, manipulative psychological tricks or superficial body language hacks. They are deep, fundamental changes in how you process the chaotic world and how you deliberately choose to respond to it. We will explore exactly how to build that initial impenetrable fortress of calm, how to filter out the endless noise to find absolute clarity, and how to wield the surgical power of sincere honesty. We will also uncover the silent, magnetic weight of taking true ownership when everyone else is frantically stepping back to avoid blame. But I need you to stay with me and pay very close attention to the final shift we will discuss, because it is the absolute cornerstone of everything else. That final shift creates an aura of presence so powerful that it does the leading for you, without you ever having to demand a single ounce of attention. By the time we are finished, you will understand exactly how to stop playing the exhausting, unwinnable game of trying to be the loudest person in the room. You will learn how to step back, anchor yourself in ancient wisdom, and let your deliberate, measured actions speak with a volume that loud words could never possibly achieve. Your journey toward that enduring, invisible influence begins right now. The first silent move to cultivating this profound level of influence is mastering the unbothered reaction. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that a person should be like a rock against which the waves continually break, standing firm while the fury of the water falls still around it. Think deeply about what happens when you are suddenly attacked, criticized, or confronted with an unexpected crisis. In our modern world, this usually does not look like a physical battle. It looks like a coworker trying to throw you under the bus during a high-stakes meeting regarding a project that is suddenly $50,000 over budget. It looks like receiving a fiercely aggressive email from a client who is threatening to cancel their massive account. In these precise moments, human instinct screams at you to defend yourself immediately. The natural physiological response is a massive rush of adrenaline. Your heart rate spikes, your chest tightens, and your brain begs you to snap back, to raise your voice, and to match their aggressive energy with your own frantic defense. Most people surrender to this impulse entirely. They react instantly, amplifying the tension in the room and transmitting their own internal chaos to everyone watching. But true, invisible leadership lives entirely within the space between the stimulus and your reaction. The Stoics refer to this as the citadel of the mind, an impenetrable internal fortress where you can observe chaos without actually inviting it inside. When that aggressive coworker points the finger at you, and the entire conference room falls dead silent waiting for your explosion, you must do something entirely counterintuitive. You do absolutely nothing for just a few seconds. You create a deliberate, intentional pause. You take a slow, deep breath. You do not scowl. You do not cross your arms defensively, and you certainly do not scramble to interrupt them. You simply let their emotional wave crash against your rock. This brief pause is where absolute mastery emerges. By not reacting instinctively, you are communicating a highly potent subconscious message to everyone in that room. You are telling them that you are not threatened. If your mind trembles even slightly, it broadcasts uncertainty and weakness. But when you remain completely unbothered, the aggressive person suddenly looks erratic and desperate, and you look like the unshakable anchor of the group. This is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending you do not care. It is about actively feeling the rising irritation, observing it, and choosing not to let it hijack your vocal cords. When you finally do speak, your tone is measured, your pace is slow, and your words are deeply deliberate. Imagine a massive oak tree enduring a brutal thunderstorm. The fierce winds might bend its branches, strip its leaves, and howl through the landscape. But the deep roots and the solid trunk remain completely unmoved. The storm can rage endlessly, but it cannot dictate the internal structure of the tree. Your mind must function in this exact same way. People will constantly provoke you. Circumstances will shift unpredictably, and daily annoyances will test your patience, like sitting completely gridlocked in a massive traffic jam when you are already running 30 minutes late. To practice this move, you must build small daily rituals of restraint. Start with low-stakes situations. The next time someone cuts in front of you in line, or the next time someone makes a passive-aggressive comment, do not fire back. Notice your internal temperature rising. Acknowledge the urge to retaliate, and then consciously let it pass. Regulate your breathing. Allow a full 3-second pause before you offer any response at all. Over time, these tiny moments of conscious regulation compound rapidly. Your brain learns to stop treating every inconvenience as a threat. As this unbothered composure becomes your default setting, people will intuitively sense the shift. They will start looking to you when things go wrong, drawn silently to your stability, because your unbothered reaction proves you are the one truly in control. Once you have established that impenetrable internal calm, you unlock the second silent move, which is the clarity filter. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught that the chief task in life is simply identifying and separating matters so that we can clearly say which are external and not under our control, and which have to do with the choices we actually control. In moments of intense pressure, confusion multiplies rapidly. When a crisis hits, human beings tend to rush. They misinterpret information, and they misalign with one another. Think about a high-stakes scenario at your workplace. A critical software system goes down. Thousands of dollars are draining away by the minute. The major client is threatening to pull their account, and everyone in the office is panicking. The typical response from an insecure leader is to add to the noise. They bark vague, frantic orders, demanding that someone figure out what is happening immediately. This does absolutely nothing to solve the problem. It only increases the cognitive load and the anxiety of every single person in the room. But the invisible leader operates entirely differently, because you have already mastered the unbothered reaction. Your mind settles like sediment in a glass of turbulent water, revealing the true patterns and priorities that are completely hidden from everyone else in the room. You process the chaos through a filter of absolute clarity. You immediately separate the peripheral noise from the essential truth. You look at the disaster, and you do not see a massive, unsolvable catastrophe. You see a series of small, manageable steps. When you finally speak, you do not add to the panic. You translate the overwhelming complexity of the situation into simple, actionable directives. You say that you cannot control the server outage, but you can control the communication. You direct one person to call the client and explain the delay. You direct another to pull the local backup files, and you take responsibility for coordinating with the engineering team. In that exact moment, you have removed the massive burden of uncertainty from their shoulders. People are frequently paralyzed by ambiguity. When expectations are murky and instructions are vague, Even the most capable individuals will stumble and hesitate. Their energy dissipates into frustration. But when you bring the clarity filter into the room, you remove that unnecessary friction. You provide a clear lens through which everyone else can perceive their purpose. You are not dictating their every move out of a desire for control. You are illuminating the path forward so they can act with absolute confidence. This act of translating chaos into simplicity is a profound form of mastery. It is a force multiplier for competence. When you consistently demonstrate the ability to cut through the noise and identify exactly what needs to be done, trust follows naturally. People instinctively gravitate toward a mind that is coherent and consistent. They stop second-guessing their own decisions and start relying on the predictable stability of your guidance. To practice this silent move, you must train yourself to ask one simple question whenever chaos erupts. You must ask yourself, what is the single most important action required right this second? Ignore the blame, ignore the frustration, and ignore the noise. Identify the one piece of the puzzle that is actually within your control. Articulate it in the simplest terms possible and direct your entire energy there. When you do this, you do not just survive the storm. You become the clear compass that effortlessly guides everyone else out of it. At this exact point in your journey toward invisible influence, we enter the danger zone. You have learned how to build an impenetrable fortress of calm, and you have learned how to filter out the noise to find absolute clarity. But there is a massive trap that catches almost everyone who attempts to walk this path. It is the dangerous assumption that being silent, unbothered, and clear is the exact same thing as being passive. Let me be perfectly clear about this. Stoicism does not teach you to become a quiet doormat. It does not call for numbness, emotional suppression, or shrinking away from conflict. If your stillness is opaque, people will mistake it for weakness, detachment, or fear. They will think you have nothing to say, rather than realizing you are choosing your words carefully. Calmness without courage is just cowardice disguised as peace. The difference between someone who is merely quiet and someone who rules the room lies entirely in the third silent move, which is the practice of surgical honesty. When your mind is settled and your perception is clear, truth becomes your most devastatingly effective tool. We live in a society that is terrified of the unvarnished truth. People constantly dance around the reality of a situation. They flatter, they sugarcoat, they use corporate buzzwords to soften the blow, and they withhold vital feedback because they are afraid of making someone uncomfortable or sparking a confrontation. But the invisible leader understands that avoiding reality corrodes trust. True honesty is not about being blunt, aggressive, or eager to tear someone down. It is not an outpouring of impulsive frustration wielded to assert dominance. Instead, it is the precise, calculated alignment of your words with reality. It is stating exactly what is, without distortion, evasion, or unnecessary emotion. Imagine you are sitting in a boardroom reviewing a major marketing campaign that is clearly doomed to fail. Everyone at the massive oak table knows it is a disaster, but the room is filled with polite nodding and vague agreements because no one wants to offend the department head. Energy that could drive progress is completely consumed by uncertainty and cowardice. The loudest person in the room might finally speak up, but they will likely do it by aggressively pointing fingers and assigning blame, which only makes everyone entirely defensive. But you approach it differently. Because you have already established your calm and filtered out the emotional noise, you do not attack. You simply articulate the reality of the situation with surgical precision. You state the facts calmly, identifying the exact gaps in the strategy without insulting the intelligence of anyone or diminishing their character. You tell the absolute truth. In that moment, the relief in the room is palpable. You have reduced the collective anxiety by finally confronting reality exactly as it is, not as everyone wishes it to be. When people feel safe in your honesty, because it is rooted in reason rather than emotional reactivity, they respond with profound respect. They realize that your words carry immense weight. You do not speak often, but when you do, it is the undeniable truth. This creates a deeply predictable and secure foundation for everyone around you. They do not have to guess your motives or interpret hidden meanings. To master this third move, you must completely eliminate the habit of speaking just to fill the silence or to appease the egos around you. You must discipline your mind to discern what is objective and what is actually worth communicating. The next time you are asked for your input on a difficult subject, do not rush to offer a comfortable lie. Pause. Ensure your internal state is entirely regulated, and deliver the truth with absolute clarity and empathy. When you consistently demonstrate that you value the truth over comfort, people will instinctively look to you for guidance, knowing you are the only one brave enough to navigate the reality of the storm. When your words are consistently rooted in that surgical truth we just discussed, you have laid an unbreakable foundation of trust. But trust cannot survive on truthful words alone. It must be sustained and validated by consistent action. Which brings us to the fourth silent move, silent execution, or the practice of absolute responsibility. We live in an era characterized by an exhausting culture of blame, deflection, and avoiding accountability at all costs. When things go wrong, the immediate human reflex is to point fingers and protect the ego. Imagine a scenario where a massive logistical error occurs in your company. A critical supply shipment is thousands of miles off course, stranded somewhere across the country. Deadlines are entirely shattered, and hundreds of thousands of dollars are evaporating by the hour. In the immediate aftermath, what usually happens, the office devolves into a frantic, loud debate over whose fault it is. Emails fly back and forth with endless justifications. People spend far more energy defending themselves and aggressively declaring that it is not their department than they do actually addressing the catastrophic failure in front of them. The invisible leader bypasses this toxic cycle entirely. They understand a core principle championed by the Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who taught that it is not what happens to you, but exactly how you choose to respond that truly matters. While everyone else is consumed by the frantic noise of assigning blame, you step forward in complete silence and simply take ownership of the solution. You do not need to be the person who caused the major problem to be the person who resolves it. Stepping into the gap without complaining, without waiting for permission, and without demanding a round of applause, is perhaps the most magnetic and undeniable form of leadership in existence. This is not about becoming a martyr or letting people constantly take advantage of your strong work ethic. It is about recognizing what is currently within your sphere of control and acting upon it deliberately. When you see a fire, you do not stand around debating who dropped the match. You grab the fire extinguisher. Every single time you accept a difficult challenge without hesitation, and every time you fix a broken process without whining about how unfair the situation is, you are silently broadcasting an overwhelming level of absolute competence. People subconsciously track this specific behavior. They notice who shrinks back into the shadows when the pressure mounts, and who reliably steps forward into the light. When you consistently practice this silent execution, you strip the anxiety and the fear away from the people around you. They begin to naturally orient themselves toward you because your actions provide a highly secure, predictable framework. They know that if a sudden crisis hits, you are not going to waste precious time panicking or throwing them under the bus to save yourself. You are simply going to act. This creates a deeply self-sustaining cycle of profound influence. You never have to demand that people follow your lead, because your absolute dependability has already proven that following you is the safest, most effective choice they can possibly make. To implement this fourth move in your daily life, you must radically shift your relationship with problems. The next time a crisis erupts, whether it is a major financial oversight at work or a sudden chaotic emergency in your own household, completely eliminate the urge to complain. Notice the natural impulse to deflect and intentionally crush it. Assess the situation. Identify the very first actionable step required to stabilize the environment, and execute it immediately. Let your deliberate actions do all of the talking for you. In a world full of loud people who are desperate to explain exactly why they could not get the job done, the person who simply quietly delivers the final result wields an invisible authority that absolutely no one can ever challenge. All of these preceding actions, the unbothered reaction, the clarity filter, surgical honesty, and silent execution, do not merely operate independently. They actively build upon one another to forge the fifth and most profound silent move, which is the aura of presence. Presence is the ultimate culmination of Stoic mastery. It is exactly what emerges when your internal calm, your clear perception, your unvarnished truth, and your absolute ownership have been completely integrated into the very way you carry yourself through the world. It is incredibly subtle, often entirely unnoticed in its mechanics. Yet it is absolutely impossible for anyone to ignore. True presence communicates volumes without you ever needing to open your mouth or prepare a lengthy speech. It signals a deep, unwavering competence and a rock-solid integrity in a way that no loud declaration or boastful claim ever could. People sense this intuitively. They feel it in the literal weight of your attention when you look at them, in the deliberate steadiness of your physical movements, and in the flawless alignment between what you say and what you actually do. This is not some sort of theatrical performance. You are not putting on a brave face or utilizing a calculated psychological manipulation tactic to bend people to your will. Instead, it is the natural, undeniable radiance of a person who has achieved total self-mastery. When you possess this kind of presence, influence begins to flow effortlessly toward you, because every single person around you subconsciously perceives your reliability, your stability, and your unified purpose. The quiet authority that this presence conveys is fundamentally unshakable because it is deeply grounded in daily discipline, honest reflection, and the consistent application of Stoic principles over a long period of time. Consider the stark difference between a chaotic environment filled with frantic noise and a room where someone stands anchored in true presence. The loud noise might temporarily capture the focus of the room through sheer shock value, but your presence actually directs the energy of the room. It subtly and powerfully shapes the decisions, the behaviors, and the attitudes of everyone present, completely without coercion or loud demands. The ancient Stoics taught that all external influence must begin with the self, and this aura is simply the external manifestation of your conquered internal world. When you are deeply anchored in reason, composed under the crushing weight of modern pressure, honest in your daily communication, and entirely willing to accept heavy responsibility, the energy you emit becomes genuinely magnetic. People will naturally begin to respond to you, not because they fear your title or feel obligated to follow your orders, but because they have absolute confidence in your unyielding steadiness. They will follow your lead naturally, deeply inspired by the predictable consistency they observe in your character day after day. This level of influence is invisible, yet it is profoundly deep. It is quiet, deliberate, and fiercely enduring. In environments where high-stakes uncertainty or immense tension exists, like a critical business negotiation or a sudden family emergency, the person who demonstrates this consistent presence becomes an invisible anchor for everyone else. Other people will unconsciously begin to mirror your steadiness, instinctively aligning their own frantic actions with the calm equilibrium they observe in you. To embody this aura fully, you must understand exactly how your energy and your reactions are perceived by others. Self-reflection becomes absolutely essential. You must observe how you respond when absolutely no one is watching you, or when circumstances become entirely chaotic. In practicing this presence, your attention to the smallest details is never superficial. It is the ultimate refinement of your mind and body into a coherent, unified whole. Even the smallest gestures, such as maintaining a calm tone of voice, taking a deliberate step, choosing measured words, and regulating your breathing, all compound into an overwhelming aura of reliability. When unexpected setbacks occur, or when massive pressures test the alignment of your internal beliefs and your external behaviors, your presence serves as an unbreakable shield. You transform from someone who simply reacts to the noise of the world into a true leader who quietly, invisibly, but undeniably shapes it. To truly lock this aura of presence into place, so deeply that it can never be shaken by external events, we must turn to the heaviest and most profound concept in all of Stoic philosophy. We have talked about staying calm, filtering out noise, speaking the unvarnished truth, and taking absolute ownership. But what is the ultimate fuel that powers all of these actions? Why is it that some people can maintain this discipline for a week, only to snap and return to their loud, frantic behaviors the moment real pressure hits. The secret lies in a concept that the ancient Stoics called memento mori, which translates to remember that you must die. At first glance, this might sound incredibly dark or morbid. But in the realm of invisible influence, it is the ultimate liberating force. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that you could leave life right now, and he urged himself to let that determine what he did, said, and thought. Think about why people desperately fight to be the loudest voice in the room. They argue over petty disagreements in office meetings. They get furious when someone cuts them off on the interstate, and they exhaust themselves trying to prove their intelligence to people they do not even like. All of this frantic noise is driven by the human ego, by an illusion that our temporary status and our petty daily victories actually matter in the grand scheme of things. But when you actively integrate the reality of your own mortality into your daily perspective, that frantic ego completely dissolves. Imagine you are sitting in a massive corporate boardroom, and a colleague actively tries to take credit for your 6 months of hard work. The natural, ego-driven response is to erupt, to defend your territory, and to shout them down to prove your worth. But the invisible leader, anchored by memento mori, perceives the situation through an entirely different lens. You realize that your time on this earth is incredibly finite, a brief flash of existence. Is it truly worth spending your precious, limited energy engaging in a toxic shouting match over a fleeting corporate dispute when you view the conflict through the lens of your own mortality? The insult loses absolutely all of its power over you. You do not react with rage because you genuinely no longer care about the petty games of the ego. This profound internal detachment is exactly what supercharges your presence. People are absolutely magnetized by someone who does not desperately need validation. When they see that you cannot be baited into an argument, that you do not scramble to defend your reputation against minor slights, and that you are perfectly content to let your actions speak for themselves, they are awestruck. They sense that you are operating on a completely different level of reality than they are. Your silence in the face of provocation is no longer just a communication tactic. It is a profound philosophical stance. You become a physical embodiment of perspective. When you carry this weight, your presence becomes a mirror for everyone else in the room. They look at your unbothered calm, your quiet execution, and your surgical honesty, and they suddenly realize the sheer absurdity of their own panic. They stop worrying about who is getting the credit or who is to blame, and they naturally align themselves behind the person who is focused solely on what actually matters. Memento mori strips away the unnecessary noise of life, leaving only the essential truth. To practice this, you must remind yourself daily of the fleeting nature of your time. When you feel the familiar urge to raise your voice, to complain about an unfair situation, or to aggressively defend your ego, stop and ask yourself if this will matter at the end of your life. Let the answer wash away your frustration, leaving behind an aura of absolute, unshakable peace. As we reach the end of this journey, I want you to look closely at the legacy you are building every single day. The frantic, loud individuals who constantly demand attention and fight for every inch of superficial territory, will eventually exhaust themselves. Their influence is like a sudden flash of lightning, loud, blinding, and instantly gone. But the invisible influence you are cultivating through these 5 silent moves is entirely different. It is enduring. It is the deep, steady undercurrent of a massive ocean. When you master your inner calm, filter out the endless noise with absolute clarity, speak only the surgical truth, take uncomplaining responsibility, and anchor yourself in the undeniable aura of presence, you fundamentally change the trajectory of your own life and the lives of everyone around you. You must remember that you cannot control the external world. You cannot control the volatile stock market, the sudden traffic jam stretching for dozens of miles down the interstate, or the deeply unpredictable behavior of your colleagues and family members. Life will inevitably throw massive, unpredictable storms in your direction. The Stoic philosopher Emperor Marcus Aurelius left us with a remarkably powerful image for exactly these moments. He wrote that you must be like a cliff against which the waves continually break, standing firm while the fury of the water falls still around it. The waves of chaos, unwarranted criticism, and sudden crisis will constantly crash against you. But they absolutely do not have the power to move you unless you consciously grant them that permission. The true legacy of a Stoic leader is not found in the amount of wealth they accumulate, the grand corporate titles they hold, or the number of people who fear their wrath. It is found in the quiet, unshakable stability they provide to a desperate, anxious world. Think about what will happen tomorrow morning when you wake up. You will step out of your front door and immediately walk back into the incredibly loud, chaotic arena of modern society. You will be immediately tested. Someone will try to provoke you in a meeting. A vital project plan will suddenly fall apart. An unexpected crisis will land right on your desk, demanding an immediate reaction. In that exact moment, you have a critical, life-defining choice to make. You can revert to your old natural instincts, raising your voice, joining the collective panic, and adding your own frantic anxiety to the loud chorus of the room. Or you can choose the path of the invisible leader. You can take a slow, deliberate breath. You can retreat into the impenetrable citadel of your own mind. You can let the frantic, disorganized energy of the room crash against you like a wave against a solid rock. And you can respond with quiet, measured purpose. Do not spend your precious, finite life trying to outshout the massive crowd. The world already has far too much noise. What it desperately needs is profound stillness. It needs men and women who possess the quiet courage to remain completely unbothered in the face of overwhelming chaos. It needs individuals who lead not by demanding compliance or forcing submission, but by quietly embodying the exact virtues they wish to see in others. Start practicing these 5 silent moves right now, today, in the smallest and most mundane moments of your daily routine. Let your absolute composure be your loudest statement. Let your surgical honesty be your ultimate weapon. Let your quiet, deliberate responsibility be your undeniable proof. And let your steady, unwavering presence be your lasting legacy. You cannot control the turbulent storm that surrounds you, but you can always, without fail, perfectly control the quiet strength of your own response. As you step forward into the endless noise of tomorrow, you must remember that the 5 silent moves we have deeply explored today are not merely temporary tactics to be used and discarded. Mastering your internal calm, applying the filter of absolute clarity, speaking with surgical honesty, executing with uncomplaining responsibility, and cultivating an undeniable aura of presence are lifelong disciplines. They form the invisible architecture of a profoundly meaningful and influential life. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus stated with absolute certainty that no man is free who is not a master of himself. True leadership and enduring influence will never be found in a louder voice, a more aggressive argument, or a desperate need for external validation from the crowd. It is found entirely within your own mind. Ask yourself tonight, when the room is empty and the chaotic noise finally fades, who are you when absolutely no one is watching? That honest answer reveals the true extent of the invisible authority you currently hold. The absolute mastery of yourself is the unbreakable bedrock of everything meaningful in this deeply unpredictable world. If you are truly ready to continue cultivating this invisible influence, if you want to relentlessly refine the quiet power of your presence and strengthen the impenetrable citadel of your mind, you must take the next deliberate step. Subscribe to Stoic Wisdom right now to officially commit to your own rigorous path of personal growth, deep reflection, and intentional action. Do not let this vital moment of clarity slip away into the endless distractions of the internet. Subscribe now, and then click on the next video appearing on your screen to explore even more powerful strategies for building unbreakable Stoic strength. Thank you for being a dedicated part of Stoic wisdom, and always remember that while you cannot control the turbulent world around you, you possess the absolute power to control your response. See you next video.